All right, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You may remember we talked about the media at the beginning of the year, and I said the media is meant to be a watchdog of democracy, that they need to sound the alarm when there's something wrong within the state, that the media, in its watchdog role, not only do they look after or look over the government so that they can increase the transparency, to allow us, the citizens, an opportunity to look into government and ensure that the will of the people is what is the foundation of their policies. But corporations would also collect some of that focus, that the media should be watching corporations, but the difficulty is the media would be owned by corporations. So the problem is that within a society, what do we do when the loyalties of the watchdog have been corrupted? And what we'll see here with this little clip from the corporation is that there's a product created by Monsanto called RBGH, or Prozzolac. And what it does is it increases milk production in cows. Now, the video demonstrates that this is an absurd product because the world is awash in milk. We have more milk than we need, and some governments are paying dairy farmers to destroy their milk so that they don't see the price of milk collapse globally. Now, Monsanto creates this product, RBGH, that ends up increasing the milk production in cows, but it also increases bacteria production in that milk in cows. And they notice that the bacteria in the milk is causing infections in the cows. And they get stuff like mastitis and other diseases that make it very difficult for the cows to live. They can't walk comfortably and things like that. And you might be saying, you know what, I just want milk. I don't care if the cow's comfortable or not. Well, then they also find out that the product that Monsanto has created, that doesn't seem to make sense because the world has lots of milk, but they create a product that makes more milk. It also leads to things like cancers in cows. And then the scientists look into it and say, you know, can that cancer be passed through the milk onto the consumers? Can the pus in the milk, can the pus in the milk pass like health risks to the consumers? And what ends up happening in this video is there's this group of investigative journalists called the Investigators. They find evidence that milk is bad in the state of Florida, that people should not be drinking the milk that's on the shelves because it contains, you know, RBGH and some of the pus and all this stuff. But the problem is the investigators, their show is on Fox, and Fox has one of their major sponsors is Monsanto, the corporation that is selling this drug to dairy farmers. So Monsanto tells the Fox Corporation, we will pull our advertising, millions of dollars of ads that we bought, we'll pull them if you air that expose that shows that our product is dangerous to consumers. So then Fox, the corporation, tries to bury the story. And this is a classic example of putting public interest to the side and saying, I need profit first. Fox says, I know milk's bad in Florida, but we really need to have Monsanto buying airspace, so we're going to ignore the fact that the milk is bad. Question, sir?
Is that just Florida milk or like across the states or Canada milk?
You know, at the time of this corporation video being created, the milk in Canada was safe. But that was under NAFTA, not the USMCA. Because of the USMCA, American corporations can sell milk in Canada. So my nationalist answer to you is buy Canadian milk.
I don't know what milk is.
Well, flip the little curtain over and just see where the milk is from. Fairlife is a milk company from the United States. If you're drinking Fairlife milk, it could contain it. If you're drinking like Dairyland or Lucerne, you're safe.
I think Dairyland, that's what
You should be good, yeah. Yes, sir.
So if we know about it,
Mhm.
that means that, well, the word got out.
The word did get out.
So then did something happen?
Well, let's see. Well, no, the drug is still being used, but let's see how the word gets out, and let's see how Fox tried to bury it.
In a world economy where information is filtered by global media corporations, keenly attuned to their powerful advertisers, who will defend the public's right to know? And what price must be paid to preserve our ability to make informed choices?
What Fox Television told us was that we were just the people to be the investigators.
Do any stories you want, ask tough questions, and get answers. So I thought, this is great, this is a dream job, fantastic. The very first thing they had us do was not to research stories, but to shoot this promo, which was the investigators.
Uncover the truth, getting results, protecting you.
And they had a film crew and a smoke machine, and we were silhouetted.
Investigative reporters.
One of the first stories that Jane came up with was the revelation that most of the milk in the state of Florida and throughout much of the country was adulterated with the effects of bovine growth hormone.
With Monsanto, I didn't realize how effectively a corporation could work to get something on the marketplace. The levels of coordination they had to have. They had to get university professors into the fold. They had to get experts into the fold. They had to get reporters into the fold. They had to get the public into the fold. And of course the FDA, let's not leave them out. They had to get the federal regulators convinced that this was a fine and safe product to get it onto the marketplace. And they did that. They did that very, very well.
Ozilac is the single most tested new product in history, and is now available to you specifically so you can increase your profit potential.
The federal government basically rubber stamped it before they put it on the marketplace. The longest test they did for human toxicity was 90 days on 30 rats, and then either Monsanto misreported the results to the FDA, or the FDA didn't bother to look in depth at them.
I'm sorry, I'm just sitting here hearing them when they say it's the most tested product in history. It makes it sound like the vaccines, right? When they're saying these are the safest vaccines in history. They're the most tested. And it's like, how long of a test did you guys do? Because you guys just created the vaccines like weeks ago. So I don't know, I just don't trust it when they say things like, this is the safest thing we've ever done. Just like they're saying here.
Monsanto's own studies.
The scientists within Health Canada looked very carefully at bovine growth hormone and came to very different conclusions than the Food and Drug Administration in the US did.
Monsanto's engineered growth hormone did not comply with safety requirements. It could be absorbed by the body and therefore did have implications for human health. Mysteriously, that conclusion was deleted from the final published version of their report.
I personally was very concerned that there's a very serious problem of secrecy, conspiracy, and things of that nature. We have been pressured and coerced to pass drugs of questionable safety, including the RDST.
We wrote the story, we had it ready a week beforehand, they bought ads.
Farmers in the milk industry say it's safe, but studies suggest a link to cancer. Don't miss this special report from the investigators.
That Friday night before the Monday the series was to begin, the fax machine spit out a letter from this very high-priced lawyer in New York that Monsanto had hired. It contained a lot of things that were just off-the-wall false, just demonstrably false. But if you didn't know the story and you didn't know how he had gone about producing it, would have scared you as a broadcaster, as a manager.
And they decided that they would pull the story and they would just check it one more time.
But the bottom line was that there was no factual errors in that story. Both sides had been heard from. Both sides had had an opportunity to speak.
1 week later, Monsanto sent the second letter, and this was even more strongly worded. And it said there will be dire consequences for Fox News if the story airs in Florida. And this time they freaked. They were afraid of being sued, and they were also afraid of losing advertising dollars. And all of the stations owned by Rupert Murdoch, and he owned more television stations than any other group in America. And that's 22 television stations. That's a lot of advertising dollars for Roundup, aspartame, NutraSweet, and other products.
So we got into a battle, and the first deal was the new general manager.
And his name's Dave, and Dave is a salesman, and you know, you pump your hand, how you doing, how you doing?
Called us upstairs to his office, and he said, what would you say if I killed this piece? What if it never ran? And we said, well, he wouldn't be very happy about that. And he said, well, I could kill it, And we said, yes, of course, you're the manager, you could kill it, it would never air. And he's hemming and he's hawing and he's back and and we couldn't figure out what is this all about. And finally he blurted out, look, would you tell anybody? I said, I'm not gonna lie for you. About a week later, calls us back to the office and says, okay, we'd like you to make these changes. In fact, you will make these changes. We said, well, look, let us show you the research that we have that shows that this information you want us to broadcast isn't true. To which he replies, I don't care about that. I said, pardon me? And he said, that's what I have lawyers for. Just write it the way the lawyers want it written. I said, this is news. This is important. This is stuff people need to know. And I'll never forget, he didn't pause a beat, and he said, we just paid $3 billion for these television stations. We'll tell you what the news is. The news is what we say it is.
We just paid $3 billion for these stations. We'll tell you what the news is. So when Donald Trump, the President of the United States, says that the media is spinning stories and they're creating fake news and all of these things, sometimes we want to look into America and disbelieve him, because it's easier to believe that he's a narcissist, he's a megalomaniac, and that he's dangerous, and in 10 days things will be better because there'll be a new president. But we have evidence here as well that the media is false reporting, they're misreporting, that the media has an agenda, and they'll even put the public interest second if it doesn't fit the agenda. So here they're saying it's not convenient for us to tell the people to not drink the milk because one of our major sponsors is the one that created the drug that produces this dirty milk. So we're just going to ignore it. The media is supposed to be a watchdog, they're not doing their job. It creates a very dangerous scenario.
I said, I'm not doing that. And he said, if you refuse to present this story the way we think it should be presented, you'll be fired for insubordination. I said, I will go to the Federal Communications Commission and I will report that I was fired from my job by you, the licensee of these public airwaves, because I refused to lie to people on the air. And it's thank you very much, you'll hear from us right away. Well, 24 hours came and went and we didn't hear a thing. And about a week later he calls us back, and now we've changed strategies. How about if we pay you some money and you just go away? And I said, how much money? Because, when somebody offers to bribe you like that, I always want to know if it might be worth it.
He was going to offer us the rest of our year's salary if we agreed not to talk about what Monsanto had done.
People don't typically bribe you if the end result is something ethical, right? They typically don't try to pay you something to silence you if silencing you is the interest, is in the public interest. So imagine if you were aware that the drinking water in Wetaskiwin was dirty, was contaminated, was making people sick, and you found this out and you wanted to tell the story, but they said, you know what, here's $500,000, don't air that story. And if you go to your friend's house and they're drinking tap water, you can't say, don't drink that water. You're never allowed to tell anybody, even your family, that the water is unsafe. There's a violation of ethics there. There's a violation of what's in the good of the community. And that's what Fox News is telling these investigators. You know what, you're never allowed to talk about milk again. Here's a payoff. There's a problem with ethics there. And Fox News is one of the major news companies in the United States. And this is this is more than 10 years ago. And news corporations and social media have become much more sophisticated. And you can definitely see in the United States when you watch them now, people have been manipulated and indoctrinated through the media on both sides of the political spectrum down there. And it's dangerous because Canada does the majority of our trade with them. So when they fall, and they will fall, we will fall too.
To not talk about the Fox corporate response in suppressing the story, and to not talk about the story. Not talk about BGH, again, anywhere. Not take the story to another news organization. Just sit back.
I said, you mean if I want to go to my daughter's PTA meetings and explain what's in the school milk at the school lunch program? I can't, no. You can never speak about this anywhere.
And Steve says, okay, write it up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Write it up. And I didn't say anything. And Dave, he wrote it up. And he FedExed it to us a couple days later. And he said, are you gonna sign? And we said, nah, Dave, we're not gonna sign that. And he said, well, send it back, okay? I said, no, Dave, we're not gonna send that back.
It was, okay, we can't buy you out. We can't shut you up. Let's get the story on the air in a way that we can all agree it will go on the air. And we started rewriting and editing with their lawyers.
Well, during this 8-month re-review process, I say, jokingly, they did things like, for example, they wanted to take out the word cancer. You don't have to identify what the potential problem is, but just say human health implications. Any criticism of Monsanto or its product, they either removed it or minimized it. And it was very, very clear, I would say, almost every edit they made to the piece, that was the aim.
And we changed this and this and this, and then that wasn't good enough. Okay, now change this and this and this. Now change this and this. Version after version after version, 83 times.
83 times is unheard of. It doesn't happen. You shouldn't have to rewrite something 83 times. Obviously, they didn't want to put the thing on the air, and they were trying to drive us crazy and get us to quit, or wait until the first window in our contract so that they could fire us.
They, in effect, announced that they were going to fire us for no cause. Well, this was a little much.
And Steve wrote a letter to the lawyer in Atlanta, whose name is Carolyn Forrest, the Fox corporate lawyer.
And I said, you know, this isn't about being fired for no cause. You're firing us because we refused to put on the air something that we knew and demonstrated to be false and misleading. That's what this is about. And because we put up a fight, because we stood up to this big corporation, and we stood up to your editors, and we stood up to your lawyers, and we said to you, look, there ought to be a principle higher than just making money.
And she wrote a letter back and said, you were right, that's exactly what it was. You stood up to us on this story, and that's why we're letting you go. Big mistake. Big mistake. That says retaliation. You can't retaliate against employees if they're standing up for something that they believe is illegal, that they don't want to participate in. So that gave us the whistleblower status that we needed in the state of Florida to file a whistleblower claim against our employer.
2 or 3 years later, we got to trial. 5 weeks of testimony led to a jury verdict of $425,000, in which the jury determined that the story they pressured us to broadcast, the story we resisted telling, was in fact false, distorted, or slanted.
Fox News appealed the verdict. 5 major news media corporations filed briefs with the court in support of Fox's appeal.
You may recall that Jane Acree, a former reporter here, sued Fox 13 in a whistleblower lawsuit, claiming she was fired for refusing to distort her report. The appeals court today threw that case up, saying Ms. Acree had no whistleblower claim against the station based on news distortion. Fox 13 Vice President and General Manager Bob Linger says the station has been